Hello and welcome to Contra from Below. These are my top 10 favorite cards to put in the 99 of your commander deck. These are not in any particular order, and this is not strictly power level. These are not the 10 strongest cards, these are just the 10 cards I'm most excited about. First up is Archivist of Ogama. 1 and a white for a 2/2 halfling cleric with flash, and whenever an opponent searches their library, you gain a life and draw a card. I think the obvious comparison is with Opposition Agent, but I think this plays a slightly different role. Opposition Agent will let you usually flash it in, yoink one card from an opponent, and then nobody tutors while the Opposition Agent is in play, and then when they destroy it, they go back to tutoring. Archivist, I think, is a little different. Because it doesn't actually prevent your opponents from tutoring, I think more often than not, they're going to actually just tutor with this in play. Oftentimes, if they have a fetch land, they're going to need to crack it for mana. And unlike Opposition Agent, they'll actually be able to get the land. So I think most people would be willing to give you a card instead of taking the tempo loss of being behind a land. All in all, I think this card is pretty good, and I'm definitely going to try it out in a few decks. Next is Artificer class. 2 and 1 for class enchantment. The first level is the first artifact spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. This is kind of like an Ethereum sculptor, but not for every artifact, just the first one. Level 2, for 2 and 1, reveal cards from the top of your library until you hit an artifact and put the rest on the bottom. Level 3 costs 5 and 1 blue, and it says at the beginning of your end step, create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control. This is like getting a sculpting steel every single turn. I think this is super powerful, a ton of fun, and I can't wait to try this out in my artifact decks. Now we got Bothersome Quiescent. 2 and a red for a 3/2 creature demon with menace and goaded creatures your opponents control can't block. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, goad target creature an opponent controls. This card is awesome for a goad deck. Being able to goad someone's creatures and then swing in because they can't block, or when you goad someone's creatures that's later in turn order from you, they're not able to block and have those creatures get killed off. I don't think you have to be in a dedicated goad deck for this to be good, though. It triggers off of any non-creature spell. Any instant or sorcery, any mana rock is able to goad other people's creatures. If you're in some sort of slower, control-y deck that isn't able to amass a large board state very early, this could be really useful. Playing a couple of mana rocks and ramp spells early, and then forcing your opponent's creatures to goad so they can't hit you while you sit back and set up sounds really strong. Another card in the same vein is Death Kiss. 5 and a red for a 5/5 creature beholder. Whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks one of your opponents, double its power until end of turn. And then it has XX red for monstrosity X. You put X counters on it and goad X creatures when it becomes monstrous. Again, in a goad deck, it's obviously really good. Being able to pump up your opponent's creatures after goading them is going to be awesome. And I think this will perhaps close out games pretty quickly once it hits the table. But you can also play it in a more pillar fort or politics way. If you have pillar fort effects, people can't attack you very easily. Just having them swing out at other opponents is really useful. And if one player goes shields down for a turn and isn't able to block very well, sometimes playing this and just asking an opponent to swing all out at the person who has no blockers might be enough to just knock them out of the game out of nowhere. So I really like Death's Kiss. I'm 100% going to be playing it in my goad deck. This next card I think is probably a staple. Deep Gnome Terramancer. 1 and 1 for a 2/2 creature gnome wizard with flash. And Mold Earth. Whenever one or more lands enters the battlefield under an opponent's control without being played, you may search your library for a plains card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Do this effect once each turn. This card is amazing. Anytime your opponent ramps with like Rampant Growth or Cultivate, or they just crack a fetch land, you're able to get plains into play, and not even a basic. You're able to get dual lands or triomes off of this. This card seems crazy strong, and it's way better than the like white catch-up ramp we've seen before. You don't have to be behind on lands for this to work. In fact, you can be ahead on lands, and as people try and catch up to you, you can ramp even further ahead with this. I think this card is going to be Super strong, a staple for white decks, especially mono white. Pick one up while you can. I know I said this list isn't a power level list, but I do think this might be the strongest card in the set. Displacer Kitten. 3 in a blue for a 2/2 cat beast with avoidance. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to one target non-land permanent you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. This card has so many applications. If you're a blink deck, being able to flicker your ETB creatures is really strong, and I think that's probably where it's going to be most at home. But there's a few other places to play this. I think this is like a storm card as well. If you have a mana rock that taps for a lot of mana, like Mana Vault, you're able to use Displacer Kitten to keep untapping the Mana Vault every time you cast a non-creature spell, and being able to tap it for 3, and then casting a 1 mana spell and untapping it, and tapping it for 3 again, basically turns everything into a ritual at that point. I think this card is potentially CDH playable. It's amazingly powerful, and I think you should definitely try to get one of these as well. The Elder Brain is one of the coolest creatures in the set. It's 5 black for a 6/6 creature horror with menace. And whenever it attacks a player, you exile every card from their hand, then they draw that many cards, and you may play lands and cast spells from among the exiled cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though you were mana of any color to cast it. I love stealing my opponent's things, I love hitting them with their own stuff, and this being able to just yoink someone's entire hand is awesome. Not to mention, if you play this with Ishin, being able to do that twice is so crazy. And if you play something like Notion Thief, not only do you steal their hand away, but you get to draw all those cards now, which pretty much will take that player out of the game and seems really powerful. This card, Majestic Genesis, supports something that I really hope Wizards does more in the future. It's 6 green for a sorcery. Reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the greatest mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. You may put any number of permanent cards from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this card's kind of like Genesis Wave, but the X is set to the CMC of your commander. I like that this encourages people to play higher CMC commanders. We have a lot of like low CMC, super strong commanders, and it kind of pushes a lot of the higher mana value cards sort of out of the format. And I like Wizards pushing reasons for you to play higher CMC commanders. I think this seems awesome with like Galta, or if you're crazy enough to put Iname as one in the command zone. This can be really powerful, and it's like awesome payoff for people playing maybe slightly worse commanders that cost a lot of mana. If you can't tell already, I really like goading people, and Spectacular Showdown is an awesome way to do so. Red and 1 for a sorcery, put a double strike counter on target creature, then goad each creature that has a double strike counter put on it this way. And Overload for 4 red. This card is awesome. It's like a Disrupt this Quorum because it goads everything on the board, but also gives everything double strike. I think playing this will very often lead to at least one player getting knocked out. If everybody's team has double strike all of a sudden, whichever of your opponents has the easiest board to swing into is going to take a ton of damage here. Not to mention it gives your whole team double strike as well, so hopefully you can swing in for a ton of damage. I really like this. I'm playing it in my Grenzo deck for sure, and I cannot wait to cast it. Lastly, I got Vexing Puzzle Box on my list. 3 mana for an artifact that says whenever you roll 1 or more dice, put charge counters on the puzzle box equal to the result. Then it can tap for 1 mana of any color, and you roll a d20. Then you can tap to remove 100 charge counters from the puzzle box, search your library for an artifact, put that onto the battlefield, then shuffle. I think this card by itself isn't good enough to play. I think you need to be in an artifact deck or a dice rolling deck. If you're in a dice rolling deck, this being able to grab stuff is really useful. If you're in an artifact deck with like Clock of Omens or Voltaic Key, stuff that untaps your artifacts, I think this can be really strong. Activating it multiple times in a turn, you can actually hopefully get to 100 charge counters relatively quickly, assuming you don't roll too many ones. I also think this is really interesting with the Dramatic Reversal Isoconceptor combo, because if you have that combo going, and you have the Vexing puzzle box, you don't actually need to be producing excess mana, nor have any other payoff card in hand. The puzzle box will then get infinite charge counters, and you can just then use those charge counters to grab an Aetherflux Reservoir, or some other artifact win condition. It is 3 mana, so I'm not sure if it goes in the higher power combo decks like that, but it's an interesting thought. And that's the list. What did you think? Is there anything I'm missing on this list? Are you going to try any of these out? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.